Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2019. Time for yet another show. Not that we're ready for it here at World Headquarters. Just about getting the computers warmed up and started here. So, well, we'll check into what we have put away from you, for you. We'll tell you tomorrow. We'll tell you what we put away from you today. It's all a great conspiracy, of course, to keep you in the dark, as you know. Let's see. Let me, we're really going to have to just wait until everything starts here. But I see that the discussion continues over whether or not it is fitting and proper, altogether fitting and proper, to refer to our concentration camps as concentration camps. People are just apparently still getting wind of this. I'm not really certain how it is that you've missed the discussion, but, you know, sometimes people get caught up in things and emerge later to figure out that everything has been going on around them. And, well, you know, that's the way it goes. That's why you got to repeat yourself every once in a while. Well, Daily Coast Radio is on the air now to do exactly that. We'll repeat ourselves over and over again for the next 2 hours. We'll probably take hints from what Bill says we ought to be doing, all the way from his perch in Portland, Maine. Today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, is broadcasting live from Iranian airspace inside a cardboard studio held aloft by hydrogen-filled balloons. It's a good idea. We couldn't find any helium, of course. There's a national shortage. You know about that. Let's see what happens. We'll see. About 2 weeks this will last, and then we'll figure out what's going on. Yes, this morning, among the flash notices coming across the Twitter transom, we find out that the Russians, who are our friends, right? Russia is our friend, says that, the drone that was shot down by the Iranians, they say, the Russians say, was actually inside Iranian airspace, which is, of course, what the Iranians were claiming. And ordinarily you say, well, of course that's what the Russians would be claiming, because they have never got our best interests at heart. They are all about their own self-interest, and there's no reason to expect them to take the American position on this or any other thing. But because they're our super good friends now, and they have such a great relationship with Vladimir Putin, you would expect that he would be backing his boy Trump up. But, well, you know, the long and short of it is, I don't think he actually likes Trump one way or another. I mean, I think he probably preferred Trump to Hillary Clinton, but it seems to me that he's most interested in playing havoc with as much of America's political, with everything. The politics, the economy, anything that they can screw around with. And screwing around with this dangerous situation is the opportunity that presents itself. All right, well, we'll just we'll check into that and see what's what. I don't have any good reason to believe. No, this is the tragedy of it. I don't have any good reason to believe our government. No real reason to believe the Russian government on this. No real reason to really necessarily believe the Iranian government on this either. So I can't tell you where the damn thing was, and it may be that nobody really knows. But it's out there now that the Russians are, despite what the good folks in Charlottesville said, they're not helping us out, and Russia may not be our friend on this one. Okay. Well, that's where we're stuck. Let's see if I can get all of the volume controls set correctly for the morning, and then we can bring you this story. We might as well start with the reporting of The Independent over in the UK that has this story. Russia contradicts Trump administration by saying downed U.S. drone was in Iranian airspace. Moscow also claims evidence Tehran attacked oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Claims the evidence that Tehran attacked these oil tankers is of poor quality. And I don't think that they mean the camera resolution. Russia has military intelligence that shows a U.S. drone was in Iranian airspace when it was shot down. the secretary of the country's Security Council has said, speaking at a briefing for journalists in Jerusalem. Why should it happen there? I don't know. Does that lend any credibility to it? I don't think so. Nikolai Patrushev also said evidence presented by the U.S. alleging Tehran was behind attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman was of poor quality and unprofessional. You got to make up your stuff with better cameras than that, I guess. Mr. Patrushev's comments came after the U.S. imposed new sanctions targeting Iran's supreme leader and other senior officials, which U.S. President Donald Trump said was a proportionate response to Iran's increasingly provocative actions. Okay, did he say that? Maybe. The U.S. government claims one of those actions was the unprovoked shooting down of a U.S. Navy RQ-4A Global Hawk I have to keep scrolling now, in something big. Oh my gosh, every time I find this piece of copy, they pop up another ad in the way. This is nuts. And it just happened again. I guess I better read faster. Iran said the drone with a wingspan larger than a Boeing 737 and costing more than $100 million, and then they express it for people in pounds, so I guess who can only understand things that way, like me, had violated its territorial airspace, a claim now supported by Moscow. So there you go. Moscow and Tehran, good friends. We're doing well here. The U.S. also has blamed Iran for attacks on 2 oil tankers earlier this month near the Strait of Hormuz, not the Straight as Trump would have it. Also, the Prince of Wales, I think, agrees with him on that spelling. The Strait of Hormuz, though U.S. officials have so far provided publicly only shaky evidence for the claim, which Iran denies. U.S. Disarmament Ambassador Robert Wood said Mr. Trump was leaving a path open to diplomacy, sure, but that Iran would be making a mistake if it interprets restraint for weakness. Mr. Trump had last week ordered reprisal airstrikes over the downed drone, but called them off at the last minute, when he was told of the likely resulting loss of life. That also a no. Really, think about how in the dark we are here. We have no idea whatsoever what's going on. Iran, I see this is coming up here. This is really something. Iran is doing my dirty work for me at last. My plan to program the Iranians into doing this for me has finally come to fruition. Ready? On Tuesday, Iran's foreign ministry said, this isn't it, the next paragraph is, but it's coming. Iran's foreign ministry said the sanctions on figures including the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, remember, our alphabetical order situation, would mean the permanent closure of diplomatic channels between Tehran and Washington. I don't know how open they are at the moment, but check this out. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, not the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, but President Hassan Rouhani, later called the penalties idiotic. Yeah, okay, I can see them saying that. And said the White House was, quote, afflicted by mental retardation, unquote. I hate the Iranians for their freedoms, that they can say this. I know we have ruled this out, and I know that there's good reasons, and we're going to continue that policy. But I don't know. I have been waiting for a word that packs the punch of the now forbidden R word. Of course, it packs the punch because it's cruel and terrible. And it took a long time for me and the rest of the world to come around to realizing that. But I'm still waiting for something that I guess speaks to children of the 70s and 80s the same way. Not that, it's not a quest that's worth anything. No one's mind is going to be changed by any words. The only thing that can happen by giving into this temptation is to make people who would otherwise be in agreement with you be angry with you. So we continue with the policy. But I guess the word hasn't reached Tehran because of the permanent closure of diplomatic channels, I suppose. But I guess we could leaflet them and let them know, or we could just politely say, listen, if you want to make a point about the American president to Americans, we don't say that word anymore. But I think that's probably lowest on their list of various priorities in dealing with Washington and the West. But I just take note for the record that over in Tehran, they're still saying this stuff, and they probably mean it. And I can't say that they're wrong in terms of their assessment of what's going on, except to say that if they're speaking metaphorically, they should look for other words. I don't know. We're not allowed to go to war over that, though. I don't think so. Anyway, I'm just surprised to see it there again, and, a little bit, I don't know what, a little surprised and somewhat relieved, even though it's not going to make any difference of how we do things here. Tensions have been mounting. This has made a huge impact on me to see this in the newspaper. Tensions have been mounting in the Gulf since Mr. Trump withdrew the U.S. from a 2015 multilateral deal in which Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in return for the lifting of crippling economic sanctions. So what we have here is Trump setting up a run at this as basically the same agreement, but with his name on it if he's successful. And so you can see how Hassan Rouhani comes to this conclusion, but it's wrong to say so. On Tuesday, the UK, Germany, and France issued a joint statement calling for de-escalation and dialogue, the two Ds, as they call them, I don't know, amid grave concern about increased tensions in the region. They also reiterated their commitment to the 2015 nuclear deal and urged all sides to do the same. It is in everyone's interest to show restraint and avoid any actions that would undermine this vital pillar of the non-proliferation regime and our collective security, the statement said. And so what do you make of that? I don't know. I don't know that we're going to clear anything up about where was that damn drone. It's just an interesting development and, kind of troublesome to watch boil over there. Man, in other news, like I said, the fight over whether or not to say the United States is operating concentration camps, I guess, continues. What's really kind of been disturbing is the alignment of institutional, what would we say? Well, for one thing, institutional Judaism, and for another, institutional Holocaust remembrance lining up on, I think, the wrong side of this situation and insisting, as I guess all institutions eventually will, that the interpretation that ought to be given to the situation is the one which preserves the greatest amount of power in their hands. And as internationally recognized arbiters of what is and isn't right about racial oppression, they need to, I guess, keep this power in their hands. They need to be the ones who will be turned to for quotes to clear the usage of words like concentration camp or Holocaust or extermination camp or what have you. This is, I guess, it's a line of business that they've opened up. It's what it seems like. And they need to be seen as the final arbiters of these things. I cannot really understand how they come to this conclusion. One, that this is some sort of permanent situation in which they'll be forever and always the only arbiters of what's right about usage like that. And two, I'm not sure, I can't really understand what the remaining power of retaining that power is if it can never be used at all. I mean, I'm certain that there's instances in which they would approve this stuff, but it strikes me that, all the things that I learned growing up, never again, and, if not now, when, and if not me, who, and, who will speak for me, etc. First they came for the, etc. All the things we learned about this stuff. And now it seems like the lesson that's growing out of it is never again say never again unless you're sure it's too late. At which point then it will be okay for you to say, well, never again, because now you're talking about history actually repeating itself. And now that it's too late, you can speak up. Go ahead. I thought the whole point of never again and never forget and all of this that we learned in all these years was to prevent this from happening again, to speak up and do something before it became too late. But apparently it's not. Apparently you have to fill out the paperwork in triplicate 2 weeks in advance and get the approval of the various official Holocaust remembrance keepers to be able to worry about racial and ethnic oppression that's escalating to the point where people are dying at the hands of an autocratic and oppressive regime. I thought that the idea was to prevent that from happening, to speak up early, but I now know that that's not the case, and that what we really ought to be doing is making sure that never again does anyone say never again without it already being too late. Right? So, as I said this morning on Twitter, remember, first they came for the people who said never again, and you definitely do not want to be one of those unlucky schmucks. You got to make sure you don't get caught out saying never again too early about something before people are dying by the millions. And let me also warn you, in case you're thinking of jumping the gun early, when 5 million people have been killed, do not forget that you're not allowed to say it on behalf of the Jewish population until that 6 millionth person has been killed. And then, at that point, I think you would be fully justified, assuming that any of those people who were setting themselves up as arbiters of the usage are still alive. You could then contact them through official channels, and I think at that point license the phrase and say never again. We definitely do not want to see 6,000,001 people eliminated. We want to. This is all about preserving the record. Apparently, you want to be able to claim #1 ranking at all times. It's very disturbing, in particular, because it actually, I mean, this complaint, to be totally honest, actually overlaps with old, and maybe it's still around in some quarters, old school right-wing Holocaust denialism from everybody, any stripe, you pick it. But old school right-wing Holocaust denialism often held that Jews were perpetuating the myth of the Holocaust in order to leverage it for political advantage. And old school right-wing Holocaust denialism, anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic Holocaust denialism, used to hold that the creation of the state of Israel was the result of a sob story that world Jewry was telling the rest of the world about this so-called Holocaust, and that you shouldn't believe them, and that Zionism was entirely based on the necessity of convincing the world that this Holocaust had taken place, and that as reparations, the world owed Jews a homeland in Israel. And so, I mean, there's a really uncomfortable overlap with the complaint that institutional Judaism and institutional Holocaust remembrance is, in fact, leveraging its power this way and saying, no, please, don't. They're trying to steer clear of the politics of it. And, I mean, maybe, to really throw a twist in there, maybe there's a real political, calculation, a practical political calculation involved. What if institutional Judaism and institutional Holocaust remembrance was convinced, well, the problem here is, you're entirely right. We are, unfortunately, here in this country and in a few other important countries around the world, not the S-hole countries, the important ones, we are under old school right-wing Holocaust denialist style autocratic rule right now. And if we don't back off of this, we could see it spill over into exactly what you people who are labeling this stuff concentration camps are talking about. Well, I mean, we're supposed to be braver than that, of course, and say, yeah, well, if we're actually on the path to that, then we definitely have to speak up, because the other lesson of not speaking up was that, well, if you think that you'll survive this by allowing them to come for the Central American migrant population because, they won't come after you, that usually doesn't work and doesn't last very long, and that's the lesson of history. But, another way of doing it is to totally wing it and to say, screw all of that, forget the lessons of history. That's actually my profession, preserving the lessons of history so that we don't end up in this situation. But let's keep our heads down regardless, because, I don't know, who wants to get hit over the head, I guess. It would be pretty scary and disappointing if it came to that, of course. Just sort of talking off the cuff about that. Jack Ox thinks we're on the right track here. But that's a really kind of scary situation, isn't it? And I think that was really the point of the whole let's speak up about never again before it happens again. But I don't know. Some people are, I guess, somewhere are drawing a pretty comfortable living from setting themselves up as the arbiter, whereas we don't have that here. So they must be right and we must be wrong. After all, the money is on their side. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, well, you probably could and should spend an entire show on that subject, but we're not going to do it. We'll take a quick trip around what is in pocket today and see what else we have to share with you. And I'm trying desperately to record a few other shows, trying to make 3. I don't know if I can make 3 out of this, but we got plenty of material. It's just a question of, do I have the time to record it all? Let's see what I want to share with you today. Wow. Let's see. Oh, this was an interesting development from yesterday's reporting in The Hill. Let's see whether they borrowed it from somewhere else. White House, believe it or not, to block Kellyanne Conway from testifying over alleged Hatch Act violations, which, of course, we all know about. She did, in fact, I think, we can't say she hasn't been convicted in a court of law, but everyone knows she did it. Violated the Hatch Act. And I wasn't sure what to take away from this headline. At first, I was worried that they were saying, well, the White House is going to block Kellyanne Conway from testifying to any of the committees about what the things that are under investigation, either by Robert Mueller or growing out of the Mueller report or about Russia or what have you, because we can't have her testifying because she's a Hatch Act violator. Like, you don't want to hear from criminals. We're going to block you from messing up your investigation by hearing from lying criminals. But no, it wasn't that. It was, if they were to investigate those Hatch Act violations, she would be barred from testifying, which they should just let her, plead the Fifth Amendment. But I think this is, to me, this is the second time that they're coming to a backdoor Fifth Amendment plea. This one right after the, all White House employees have absolute immunity from testifying about anything that has anything to do with their service in the White House, regardless of what position they served in and what contact they ever had with the president. That's another discussion, though, for another time. The White House intends, in this case, to block Kellyanne Conway from testifying before the House Oversight and Reform Committee later this week about alleged Hatch Act violations. The administration said in a Monday letter to Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings that Conway would not testify, citing long-standing precedent. Of course, the precedent isn't that Hatch Act violators don't testify, but it's the same one that they were relying on before. The White House decided on the move ahead of a Wednesday vote from the panel to subpoena Conway if she doesn't appear voluntarily. So add that to the pile of subpoenas, I guess, tomorrow. President Trump has staked out an uncompromising position thus far in stonewalling Democratic requests for testimony and documentation as part of the ongoing investigations into the administration. Clearly, if you're going to add this one to the list, It's not about things Mueller investigated. It's not about Russia. It's about any investigation into anything the White House did or was alleged to have done. This is a totally different subject. I mean, she violated the Hatch Act in furtherance of some of the other cover-ups, but this is entirely separate. They're still going to stonewall everything. Conway was invited to appear before the panel on Wednesday alongside a representative from the Office of Special Counsel. The federal watchdog issued a report to Trump earlier this month recommending that Conway be fired for repeated violations of the Hatch Act, which prohibits federal officials from weighing in on elections in their official capacity. The report cited Conway's comments critical of 2020 Democratic presidential candidates and her lax attitude about past citations. She was previously found to be in violation of the Hatch Act for her remarks about the 2017 special U.S. Senate election in Alabama, which they lost. Conway and the White House have been defiant about the OSC's findings, accusing the watchdog of attempting to squelch her First Amendment rights and questioning whether she even violated the law. Trump said he has no plans to fire her, despite the recommendation. In an interview earlier on Monday, Conway simultaneously insisted that she had not violated the law, that the law did not apply to assistance to the president, and that Democrats were attempting to silence her. She did not say in the interview whether she planned to testify. We think I'd be the first member of the West Wing to ever be hauled in front of Congress to talk about the Hatch Act, Conway says of the potential testimony. That means nothing. Of course, she's probably would be because she's the most flagrant violator of it of all time. But all right. Henry Kerner, a lawyer with the OSC, is expected to say in his prepared testimony that he has no personal animus toward Conway, but that her cited remarks are no different than partisan attacks that a campaign official would make. And that is the wrap-up on that story. Good, we get that in before our first break. I will try and cram in a little bit of breakfast in the next 2 minutes and be back with, well, who knows what else, but I'm sure something fun and entertaining and probably not even a war. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see, trying to organize our stories as we go on and keep an eye on things that are happening as they're happening. But it's not always entirely possible to keep all of these balls in the air while juggling. Let's switch over to something I hinted at during the discussion on Kellyanne Conway here. This claim of absolute immunity from testimony. This is something they're expanding every day, and I guess Kellyanne Conway has a better claim to it than the latest claimant, I suppose. But this is an interesting discussion of how troublesome this expansion really is. From Just Security, Ryan Goodman and John T. Nelson, in case you're confused about which John Nelson it is, it could happen, have this piece about Annie Donaldson. This is the chief of staff to former White House, or I guess assistant, depending on how you, what citation you got. Some people say assistant to the president, assistant to White House counsel Don McGahn, perhaps chief of staff to White House counsel, chief of staff. Armando wants to know if he can jump in on this discussion. Absolutely. I probably should have rigged it this way so that I could eat breakfast and relax earlier. But anyway, let me start with this article, and you can listen along, comment along, whatever you feel like doing. I can probably multitask answering the phone in the middle of this thing. But Annie Donaldson is not the president's, quote, alter ego. Let's find out exactly what that phrase is all about and why it matters. It could almost be a bar exam question. Ryan and John say in the beginning of their piece, and don't worry, we will not be testing you on this. Under the executive branch theory that the president's senior aides, and Kellyanne Conway is one, I think, the president's senior aides are, quote, absolutely immune from appearing before Congress. Not just testifying, but appearing at all. Which of these is not like the others? Ready? 1, former assistant to the president, White House counsel, Don McGahn. Former assistant to the president and White House communications director, Hope Hicks. Former deputy assistant to the president and White House deputy counsel, Annie Donaldson. So, those are your three choices. Which one is not like the other? Well, in answering the question, assume that the executive branch's theory is valid. That's difficult to do. But for the purposes of this exercise, assume it's valid. Also assume the theory applies to former as well as incumbent officials. Also problematic. And finally, assume that the theory is not limited to advisors who especially cover national security and foreign affairs. All of these things are huge assumptions, in case you don't get their tone. Based on the executive's own framework, the answer to the question is clear, and they have grabbed something from somewhere here that actually says C, except that would have been 3 in our formulation of it. A deputy assistant to the president falls outside the scope of, quote, absolute immunity theory, as previously articulated by the executive branch. I don't know who they're quoting on this, but it's set up as a block quote. Nevertheless, the White House is reportedly planning to assert that Donaldson has absolute immunity and cannot be compelled to provide testimony to Congress. The outcome could be a game changer for congressional investigations of possible obstruction of justice and abuse of power as described in the Mueller report. Ann Tyndall explained at Just Security that Donaldson may be Congress's prized witness. As chief of staff to McGahn, Donaldson reportedly took copious notes. Mueller's report cites her notes and testimony to the special counsel's office nearly 70 times. I wonder if that guy should testify. As articulated over the years, the theory of absolute immunity, and that's one of Armando's points all along, has been, yes, it's not something they made up this year. It's just been BS for a long time. Over the years, the theory of absolute immunity is based on the premise that the most senior presidential aides function as the president's alter ego. There you have it. Assisting him on a daily basis in the formulation of executive policy and resolution of matters affecting the military, foreign affairs, and national security, and other aspects of his discharge of his constitutional responsibilities. That's a problem in itself for this administration. He doesn't discharge any constitutional responsibilities. The president must be able to rely on them for their candid advice, and they cannot be forced to direct their time and attention to being drawn away to Capitol Hill when they are in direct service to the president. Due to the absolute nature of the immunity, or at least the claim anyway, rather than a qualified one that could involve the balancing of different public interests and congressional responsibilities, the circle of senior aides has been kept small. According to the Office of Legal Counsel, the theory covers immediate advisors, and alternatively, members of the president's immediate staff, who customarily meet with the president on a regular or frequent basis, those upon whom the president relies directly for candid and sound advice. Well, the sound part is definitely out the window on that one. Let's work on that. I think we can leverage our way in here. He relies on them directly for candid advice. It's just unsound. That's the problem. According to Jonathan Schaub, immunity has never been claimed for a White House official who reports to a more senior White House official, such as a deputy assistant, deputy counsel, or White House counsel chief of staff, all of Donaldson's titles. Schaub, who worked on these issues in the Office of Legal Counsel, explained further, we had many such conversations, all agreed doctrine limited to closest of close, 8 to 10 max. That's a quote from him. That list of 8 to 10 would include senior advisors to the president, such as, George Stephanopoulos for Clinton, Karl Rove for Bush, David Axelrod and Valerie Jarrett for Obama, and, unfortunately, under this current regime, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, and Stephen Miller. Below that line are assistants to the president, like McGahn, who are also within the class of immediate advisors who regularly meet with the president and frequently meets with the president alone. That's one of the other formulations. Michael Stern, former senior counsel to the House of Representatives, told Just Security, OLC has not been clear on exactly who qualifies for immunity under its theory. And remember that it is a theory. And remember whose theory it is, too. I mean, just to really pile it on, one, it's just a theory. And two, it's the theory of the OLC, which, though it has been granted lots of leeway and deference in the past because of the kinds of people who tend to work there, even though that's no longer the case, they're also still not a court. That's what makes it just simply a memo, simply an opinion, a theory, and nothing else. Anyway, on top of all of that, they haven't been very clear on who qualifies for immunity under its theory, and probably because they don't run into this problem all that often. It's not all that frequently the case that the president's top advisors need to be questioned by Congress in what amounts to a criminal investigation, or at least a close parallel, even though we don't do law enforcement in the legislative branch, as we all know, right? So that list of 8 to 10 is pretty limited. Michael Stern says, again, former senior counsel to the House of Representatives, OLC has not been clear on exactly who qualifies for immunity under its theory, but it has suggested it applies to the president's immediate advisors who assist him on a daily basis. It is questionable whether it would apply to an aide who does not provide direct assistance to the president on a daily basis, but who generally deals with the president through a more senior White House official to whom she reports. Trying to envision the strongest argument for the executive branch, I think I'd pause here for just a second and say that's possibly why the Mueller report relies so heavily on Donaldson's, is that right? Do I have the name right? Her notes. Because, well, for one thing, it's great that there are such notes, and everyone wants to rely on notes. That's one of the better sources you can have. But they may have relied very heavily on her notes because it was their assumption that there were rules, and it wasn't LOL, YOLO, NM situation, which may be one of the great, it may prove historically to be one of the great shortcomings of Robert Mueller and his vision for how this was going to play out. But he may have relied on her notes not only because they were there for the taking, but because he assumed that her notes and her testimony would not be declared off limits by the White House because rules exist. But again, thanks. You could wake up any time, Rob. It'd be great. All right. Trying to envision the strongest argument for the executive branch, perhaps the White House could say that even if Donaldson does not herself possess the immunity, former White House counsel Don McGahn does, and having his chief of staff, that would be Donaldson, testify about what exactly he told the president should also be covered by McGahn's immunity. The many problems with that line of analysis include the fact that immunity follows individuals while privilege follows information. It's also tenuous to suggest that Donaldson's position as chief of staff makes a meaningful difference here. She could have been a much lower staffer who happened to take copious notes. Whether the Trump administration will even have recourse to this strained reading of its immunity theory is far from certain, as the federal courts have proven skeptical of the executive's immunity claims for senior aides in the past. In 2008, Judge John D. Bates considered the theory of absolute immunity an invalid concoction by the executive branch in a case involving President George W. Bush's former White House counsel, Harriet Miers, who, I remind you, it took 2 full years to get in front of Congress, and the administration she served had concluded its term and been replaced by a successor by the time they got her to testify to the next Congress, by the way. Judge Bates, a Bush appointee and former senior Justice Department official, could not have been more unequivocal in his repudiation of the idea that senior aides are absolutely immune from compelled congressional process. He stated it this way: the executive cannot identify a single judicial opinion that recognizes absolute immunity for senior presidential advisors in this or any other context. So take that when you're trying to weigh, should the OLC's opinion be given this much weight? One judge who's taken it up had said, no, there's no reason why you should take it literally or seriously in any way, and you can't point to anybody ever having done that. Anyway, that simple yet critical fact bears repeating. The asserted absolute immunity claim here is entirely unsupported by existing case law. Oh well. In fact, there is Supreme Court authority that is all but conclusive on this question and that powerfully suggests that such advisors do not enjoy absolute immunity. I don't know if he knew about LOL YOLO NM, but he should have seen it coming, I guess. That said, now outside of Bates's quote here, that said, the executive branch across Democratic and Republican administrations have maintained the absolute immunity theory because no one has stepped up to stop it yet. Indeed, a 2014 Office of Legal Counsel opinion during the Obama administration also included an argument for why Judge Bates's opinion in the Myers case was wrong. If the Trump White House does assert immunity for Donaldson, they may undercut their own position when this dispute with Congress reaches the courts. It will show federal judges just how far the executive branch's concoction of the theory can go. But losing on the merits is not the worst situation for the White House. Their strategy may be to assert the claim of absolute immunity, wait until that winds its way through the federal courts until it is ultimately resolved, likely in favor of Congress, and then begin the next round with Congress by invoking executive privilege over specific pieces of information. There are ways for Congress to try to handle such maneuvers, and courts will be ever more alert to congressional concerns, maybe, if the White House invokes immunity on such wholly weak and unprecedented grounds for Donaldson. Well, we'll see. That is the end of the piece. Armando was politely waiting until that time came around to chime in. So we're here, and so we'll await your call. But yeah, that is absolutely entirely possible, and I would assume that is the strategy. Simply assert it, knowing that you'll lose. You just assert things in order to live to fight another day. You wait for it to make its way into court, and as we have seen on these subpoenas, it can take an awfully long time for the House of Representatives to get around to convincing itself that A, it ought to file a case, and then B, filing the case it has convinced itself it ought to file can take an awfully long time. And even then, losing in court, appealing, losing the appeal, trying to appeal from the appeal. Maybe they get an appeal, maybe they don't, maybe they're rejected out of hand, but it takes weeks, months, sometimes years to go through this process only to get ourselves back around to it and say, all right, well, if they're not absolutely immune, well, then maybe the information is privileged. And we'll begin to claim that now instead. We don't claim that now so that you can't test them both at the same time. And I guess it's possible that a court, in taking this up, will say, not only are we disfavoring this claim, but we're disfavoring it so strongly that we anticipate your claim of executive privilege. And although that hasn't been raised here, we're going to take that up and tell you that that's out the window too, with respect to, say, this particular piece of information coming from that person. But they can't anticipate everything. Well, and, this is the way they plan to do it.
Good morning, David.
Hi,
actually, that's actually the court's doing a bad job, and they do too often, and particularly in these disputes. Normally, any objections you have to any request for discovery or a subpoena, you have to raise all your arguments at once so the court can address them. You don't get to do them one at a time. And you raise the fundamental problem with all this, and this is all mental masturbation. Is Annie Donaldson covered by absolute immunity privilege? Almost certainly she's not. She's not a direct advisor to the president. But Don McGahn
how they got her
is
notes.
A direct advisor to the president, and arguably he is covered by the absolute immunity privilege. which Judge Bates doesn't agree exists, but that's one district court judge. So who knows what other judges will say. Here's my fundamental problem with the entire discussion.
All right.
You know what cuts through absolute immunity? You know what cuts through executive privilege? You know what cuts through Rule 6E?
That I know.
An impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
None of those defenses or objections are valid in an impeachment inquiry because it is a quasi-judicial proceeding, a criminal proceeding. And as we know from U.S. v. Nixon and the recent D.C. Circuit cases, none of those objections hold up in an impeachment inquiry. If you really want this stuff as opposed to the show of, look at me, I'm being really hard on this. Like, if all you want to do is set up cases for a future Congress and a future president, okay, take your time. Maybe next year, give the Supreme Court will hear it right after the election, and Trump will lose in court. And boom, the next Congresses and the next presidents will have nice precedents to deal with.
Maybe. Yes.
If you want to deal with the actual matter at hand, the unfitness of the current president, and that's why you want Andy Donaldson. We're not investigating Andy Donaldson's behavior or policies or whatever the heck Andy Donaldson did. The purpose is because she is a key figure in the Mueller report, which is a de facto impeachment referral.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's
so
true.
why don't we open an impeachment inquiry and say, listen, we're not here to debate separation of powers. We're here to investigate whether the president of the United States should be impeached.
No, we can't do that. Then we might lose enough seats that we're not allowed. We wouldn't have the leverage to tell people not to say never again and that they're concentration camps. We need to be here in power to tell people, do not challenge this.
Right? Because, look, that article you just read is very good. It absolutely captures everything. McGahn, probably, if you accept the theory, McGahn is covered, Donaldson isn't. She's not a direct advisor to the president. All true. And then what happens is you can see from the Bates opinion from 2008, if you read it, he said, okay, and after we decide this, you got to go assert executive privilege in person. Okay, so then they started asserting executive privilege in person. And then where are we? 6 months more of a different court fight.
Yes, well, that seems to be the plan.
This is pure running out the clockism.
I guess so. I mean, especially if you know that if you anticipate that argument coming up later and know that an impeachment inquiry cuts through it, then, set it up. You wanted to set up all these precedents and cases so that you would have let's say a future Congress dealing with, oh my God, what if a future Congress has to deal with a rogue president? Wouldn't that be crazy? I hope that never happens.
We better set up some precedents for when a really bad president,
really crazy guy,
it gets here.
It's just silly not to do that. All right, so set it up for one in case it happens, right?
It's pretty basic stuff, and it's not a new argument for me. And if I'm boring everybody with repeating myself, but this is not a plan to get to the facts. This is a plan to set up precedents for the next Congress and the next president, and the next president to see what you're going to give them the tools they'll have to check some rogue president who accepts emoluments, locks up kids, steals everything that moves, and obstructs justice and conspires with the Russians.
And puts his presidential library in Trump Tower.
President that does that. Not for this one.
Yes, well, because what can you do about this guy? He's not stealing. Stealing's not his type.
How is this defensible? I don't even understand how anyone thinks this is okay. From the House Democrats, from Nancy Pelosi. Again, what is the purpose anymore?
I'm not sure. I imagine.
I don't ask rhetorically. What do you think her purpose is?
I only think that she's just one of those people that believes, well, it would be worse somehow if we weren't here. Because there are definitely some things that the president has tried to do that we've stopped, and Republicans wouldn't try to stop them. Although, quite honestly, Trump's record during his first 2 years of his presidency with a Republican House is no better than it is now. So,
well, the things that are subject of this impeachment inquiry, obstructing investigations, encouraging foreign interference in our elections. How has Trump been stopped at all? What, we talk about the wall money, but you know what? Arguably, he wasn't stopped on that. He just took some money from somebody else and did something with the wall. Now, I don't know the story there. I don't even know if anything's actually happening. But at least in theory, legally, he said, no, I took this $7 billion from somewhere else, and I'm still building my wall. There's a case. There was a case. There's another court case on that, and the House was found not to have standing.
Dang. Well, I don't know. I really can't. I mean, I don't want to
what did she stop
take the position that it's useless to have Democrats in the majority, because I would prefer that.
I don't want to, but
I got to say that, like, for instance, for people who say, well, they weren't able to manipulate the elections in 2018 and that's how you won the House, I'd say, well, but that happened under a Republican trifecta. Maybe we should put them back so it doesn't happen again. Is that what you're trying to tell me? That the Democrats being in the
I'm asking, what is Pelosi achieving?
I cannot really.
That's an honest question. I am perplexed. What is being achieved? There are no precedents that are actually going to come out of this, by the way. They'll lose, and then they'll have a negotiated whatever, and everyone will be happy. It'll happen in December of 2020 after the next election.
Yeah. I mean, that's the usual way that these things go, and the courts aren't entirely wrong for saying
they don't like to get involved.
Yeah, well, why would we? Yeah, I don't want to get involved. It's judicial canons, dictate that you don't insert yourself if you don't have to. And traditionally, historically, these things, we've been down this path a couple of times, and it always works itself out in the end as long as we stay out of it. And so they're not wrong. It's just that it's not a particularly effective.
The court, Bates did get involved, and that's why Myers ended up making a deal and testifying behind closed doors, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, okay.
About the Attorney General firing scandal, which was really an absolute scandal.
I guess I say nothing came of it because it happened later. Yeah, that's true, too.
Literally led to no legislation. Nothing happened as a result of that.
That's interesting. So I wonder, did Congress have a legitimate legislative purpose in investigating?
It did. It just didn't act.
That's okay. Yeah, we had that. We had a legitimate interest. We just lost it.
We lost it.
We had
and
lost
lose it again.
I lost my cases, but I also lost my interest. That's the problem.
Well,
that's it. We've preserved the legislative interest.
They proved that there was, absolute partisan demands from Karl Rove and Josh Bolton.
Yes.
To fire attorney generals who wouldn't go after Democrats.
Yes.
It was a real, honest-to-goodness scandal that was, I guess it didn't violate any criminal laws, but that's the whole point. Pass a criminal law to make it illegal.
Right.
Or at least the civil law.
Mind you that the first 6 months of delay in that was because Democrats were saying, this is nonsense. This didn't happen. This is a stupid conspiracy theory because you hate Bush.
That's correct.
And then
we were all told that it was nothing, that we were just crazy.
Yeah.
Well, at least they don't tell us we're crazy this time about Trump, but they still don't do anything.
That is true. The people who told us that were, of course, Obama White House staffers who are all now resistance leaders and running for Congress.
And they're for impeachment, interestingly enough.
Yes.
I guess if Biden wins the presidency, they'll be, no, leave the executive alone. He must have a lot of deference.
Yeah,
look, it's frustrating, and I know I'm boring on this at this point. But I just think you're not going to make new norms. You don't, because this executive branch, the Congress has accepted this nonsense, and they're going to keep accepting it. Mm-hmm. Make this about Trump, at least.
You could try that.
That Congress have the right. And again, let's be practical about this. How do we get this out in open hearings? How do we get Annie Donaldson's testimony on the record and Don McGahn's testimony on the record? And for Christ's sakes, Robert Mueller's.
Yeah, that would be great. I would like to call Mueller to ask him to opine on the absolute immunity claim. How did you defeat that? How did you get to talk to Annie Donaldson, Mr. Mueller?
Well, he said U.S. v. Nixon, I would assume.
Yeah, well, I was just curious because we can't get her. So could you tell
said,
us?
Well, he would say something like, I would assume. It says, well, you need to make it a quasi-judicial proceeding.
So that's fine. That's good testimony.
And so that you can defeat all these privileges.
Yeah. He said
what's that called again? Oh, yeah, it's called an impeachment inquiry.
Maybe that could be helpful. That wasn't in your report, so he can't testify to that. But also missing from your report is how you got to talk to all these people who have absolute immunity. I cannot figure this out.
I assume there's a part of Mueller that says, you guys won't even open an impeachment inquiry. You're going to give me make my life miserable?
That's right. I am busy that day. That could be. I hadn't considered that possibility. So you guys are so lame.
He's got a point. If that's what he thinks, he's got a point. He said, how serious are you guys taking this? You're not even opening an impeachment inquiry. I sent you 10 described episodes of obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
I told you right there in black and white that while we can't indict him, you could do something.
Yeah.
It's right there in the Constitution. Take a look.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that possibility. I just thought he was being stuffy.
He was being very stuffy and very elided a lot, but it's there. You can see it. And, all these things. Oh, I hear music.
Yes, right.
Can I stay on for another segment?
Yes, certainly. Just in 20 seconds, they won't hear you anymore. But in a minute and 20 seconds, they will. So, yeah, if you don't mind, we'd love to have you stick around for that because there's more that we need to bore people with. Just a little bit more about this. I know it's not. It is boring. It isn't boring. This is what we're here.
I don't think it's boring. I think it's serious and important and, frankly, would capture everybody's attention, but that's a different story.
All right. Well, we'll find out
on the other side.
Yes. Okay. We'll find out in a minute. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is still with us, and let's see. We're going to have to hit you again and again and again with this stuff. I will say, you're breaking news with the theory that Robert Mueller doesn't want to come to testify because he thinks it's a waste of time, and the Democrats won't do anything more with his testimony than they've been able to do with his report. And that is entirely possible, and I bet there's a part of him that feels that way, which is why he said in his statement, look, everything you need is here. If you don't want it, then I don't want to come and talk to you about it. Maybe. That'd be a hell of a statement. He should have said that. That would have been a lot clearer.
Yeah.
But, okay. So, let's see. You were telling me during the break you had a particular Axios story in mind for discussion, but you can't come up with it now?
I iPad to my Skype, so I'm just going to tweet it
at
you, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That way you'll at least see it.
I will pick it up. Okay. But,
It's from the incomparable Mike Allen. You know him.
Okay, yes.
Being sarcastic.
All right.
Okay, so
there it is.
I will connect it first to the Axios thing because just a few weeks ago, I think you and I have joked about this a lot on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Democrats are frustrated that all those bills they passed that aren't going anywhere don't get any attention.
Oh, yeah, I hate that. I'm so mad. Yes.
Right. Yeah, they say, we don't want to say impeachment, but when we say infrastructure, nobody pays attention. Whatever they say. Yeah, listen, they passed a lot of good laws, and I get that. Good bills, but they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's what happens.
It's posturing for 2020, so you can say, look at all these things we passed, and do nothing, Mitch. Mm-hmm.
He's so bad. I don't like him.
Right. So, you want to run against McConnell. It has its purposes. I have no problem with doing all that. I don't. But that's not some magic bullet. Look at our agenda. Look at all the things we passed. I mean, great. Wow. No one's going to pay. No one's going to care.
It does prove that we can chew gum and chew gum.
In a presidential election, David, it's not going to matter anyway. The top of the ticket's going to determine the whole thing.
Yeah.
It always has. It always will. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong? Do you disagree?
No, not at all.
Has a presidential election been decided by the congressional agenda ever?
I can't think of either off the top of my head or I'm sure if I dig. No, I imagine sometimes things have overlapped when there were serious presidents who had policy agendas and they ran on
they
that.
overlap. I mean, in essence, the congressional agenda is going to be what the next president's agenda is to start with.
But that, if it happened, it would have been back in the days before we decided that you vote for president based on who you want to have a beer with.
Right. All those things are true. But my point is, so frankly, the most effective action that Congress can take is to expose the president of the United States as much as possible. 3% of the country has read the Mueller report. Maybe 25% has been aware of some of the things in it. And
Hollywood stars are reading it now, so maybe more.
Well, that I can't blame people for trying. They're trying.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
They're doing more than I am.
Do it.
So and there's a nice series going on at Daily Kos, the community reading of the Mueller report.
It's a good thing.
That Susan Grigsby is leading. She's doing a great job. I don't want to criticize anybody doing that. They're doing great. They're doing more than Pelosi's doing.
Yeah. No, it's a great thing. I mean, I can't fault them for not having the magic formula.
The magic formula is there. We know what the magic formula is. It's public hearings.
Yeah, well, we don't have that. So, they're doing great things. That's what they should be doing.
So what gets attention? Here, the Mike Allen, to now reconnect you to the Mike Allen tweet. Trump slump hints big media. That is, Trump stuff isn't driving the rating. People are tired of talking about Trump.
Okay.
The shock factor around President Trump's unplanned announcements, staff departures, taunting tweets, and erratic behavior is wearing off, and media companies are scrambling to find their next big moneymaker. That's kind of fun, which is news driven by finding the next big moneymaker, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's porn, I guess. Go ahead.
Democrats don't appear to be the lifeline media companies are hoping can fill the gap for diminished Trump interests.
Damn, we're failures.
We're not really we're not good enough for it. We don't sell it. But you know why? There's a point there. Pelosi's not delivering what will get the attention, and it's an impeachment inquiry that will get wall-to-wall coverage, and people can talk about it every day's testimony, and it'll drive the news, and it'll be Trump's a crook every day for the entire time you have an impeachment inquiry. Now,
I guess so.
People say, well, what if people don't show up? Well, here's the thing. We're not going to use inherent contempt. Fine. We'll go to court. You go to court, they can't raise executive privilege. They can't raise absolute immunity. They can't even raise the stupid legitimate legislative purpose. If we had started the impeachment inquiry right after Mueller in May, we'd be done with cases by the end of this month, and we could start hearings in July.
Yeah, well, we didn't.
But now we're doing all this regular oversight. By the way, there's been zero oversight. Not a single person has testified before the Judiciary Committee. Hope Hicks showed up behind closed doors, mind you.
Yes.
Why they agreed to do it behind closed doors? You tell me.
I don't know.
What was so we could read the transcript the next day and say, he called her Miss Lewandowski, which was stupid. And I assume, frankly, I'd give Nadler credit that it actually wasn't any type of trolling. About Hope Hicks having had a relationship with Corey Lewandowski. Jason Miller had a meltdown about it, which is pretty funny. So that was good and funny, but
Jason Miller,
that doesn't really move the ball forward politically.
Everyone remembers Jason Miller, right? The Trump campaign aide who had an affair with another Trump campaign aide and got her pregnant.
Jay Delgado, crazy
and tried to give her like abortion pills in her drink and.
Yes, he's a terrible guy. He worked for Teneo, of course, which is a terrible company, and that's another story.
Okay,
but,
I mean, you could again a script that would be thrown out, and the producers would say, "This is crazy. Abortion pills in her drink. Get out of here."
Well, it's true. You're not making that up.
Well, you know what's stranger than fiction? All right. Let's say. So where were we at this? So Democrats aren't providing content. That's the problem.
Right. And the content is there if they want it. But
the time
if
is
they
now.
Want to keep saying we're nice, look at us not doing impeachment, look how not crazy we are, whatever the heck. Listen, I would like a cogent explanation of this. Now, people will say, oh, what are they going to do in court? How is this better? We've explained it 27 times, and then finally got Professor Tribe to get on his soapbox, and finally even Renato Mariotti had to acknowledge, maybe I was wrong. Said, yeah, we told you were wrong 6 months ago, you moron. Yeah, I don't like Renato Mariotti, sorry.
I wrote it
if
for
you do.
10 years ago.
And it's pretty clear that it removes legitimate legislative purpose as an argument. It removes executive privilege as an argument. It removes Rule 6E as an argument. It removes absolute immunity as an argument. All those things fall by the wayside. So if you really want the testimony, you really want the information, you really want to educate the public about it, the thing to do could not be more obvious. And it's not an abuse of impeachment. We all agree, including Nancy Pelosi, that impeachment is appropriate for the behavior of this president. No one's going to say this is some type of overreach. We're not talking about a private affair with consenting adults.
Though there is one.
Right?
Yeah,
all those.
you got to have
there
it.
are plenty of those.
One.
And unconsenting affairs.
Right.
In fact, there are sexual assault allegations. There's emolument allegations. There's abuse of power allegations. There's much to investigate. And you put the impeachment inquiry label on it, it grabs everyone's attention. And frankly, is the best pure political move, in my view, for the House. Because the issue, we can talk about this and we can talk about that, and we're in the midst of our own primary to choose our own nominee. But whoever our nominee is, the election in 2020 is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. And we, as Democrats, have every right to decide what we want. But I'm not kidding myself that any particular candidate is going to be the issue, not even Bernie. For which some people would say would make socialism the campaign issue. I don't even think that's true.
It doesn't. Don't worry about that. Whoever the candidate is, the Republicans are they're ready to make socialism the issue. So you don't actually have to have a socialist to do it. You might think that's the best way to do it, but I don't know.
They'll do it for you. So, but I don't even think that's going to work. It's going to be Donald Trump. Is he acceptable to you as president or not? So whatever we do as a political party and whatever the Congress does, as the House does, as a body, if you're just thinking in crass political terms, an impeachment inquiry is the way to go. Now, what people always say in response is, well, we've already defeated them on the fact that obviously legally it's a better position. The other thing we know is that it's going to get a lot more press attention. So then the third objection is, well, the Senate won't do anything. But Professor Tribe's already answered that. If after you do 6 months of hearings or whatever time it takes to go through all the record, and I think it should take more than 6 months. I think it should extend into 2020. But suppose you want to end it early in 2020. Every day when you're talking about Trump's wrongdoing, his unfitness, the things he did, that's good for us politically. And no one thinks it's overreach. And then when you finish and you say, well, I've talked to the Senate, I've looked at the Senate, and they're saying no way, no how. You know what we're going to do? We're not going to vote out articles of impeachment. We're going to publish our own factual findings, and we're going to adopt a resolution saying the president should be removed from office, and leave it there. But not formally send it to the Senate, because if that's but you make that choice after you air out all the facts, or you can decide, you know what, we're going to make them look bad, even though we know they're not going to act, by making swing Republicans like Susan Collins defend why she didn't remove President Trump from office, or Cory Gardner. You know, those are two that I can think of off the top of my head that you would want to put Trump around their necks. So but that's not a decision you make now. You can make it after the hearing, and you can look at the polling and say, well, now 60% of the public thinks he should be impeached. So maybe we should hang this around the president.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, David. And again, I have no illusions that McConnell is going to put forth a trial. Even my estimation is he would do what he did with Garland and never schedule a hearing.
Yeah,
much less a trial. So
I mean, it's possible,
but what can we do? We can do what we can do. We can air all the things he did. Either do we think they're bad or do we not think they're bad?
You asking me?
Well, I'm asking as a Democrat.
Yeah.
Do we think they're bad?
Yes.
I think they're bad. I'd love for the public to know what he did.
Yes.
How's that going to happen?
I don't. Through infrastructure and healthcare.
It's not going to happen through infrastructure, and it's not going to happen in a budget showdown. Showdown. By the way, you want to, this is where Pelosi gets to say, "See, I'm fighting Trump," and she will, presumably.
Yes. Right. And she'll do very well with it.
There is a debate, which you probably heard about, with regard to some immigration bill that's being debated, and it's caused deep divisions inside the House Democratic Caucus, apparently. Because, and I heard Jim Himes describe it as, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And I don't know what they're actually arguing about. I know it's a thing, but
yeah, I remember
he's right,
it from Gingrich.
Maybe he's wrong. My point is actually talking about issues isn't that uniting for us, and it isn't slam dunk winners. Because I'm going to say, well, you let them keep separating children and parents at the border. You didn't stop them. I'll go further. One of the big things that will happen with the budget, I assume, is that Democrats will demand a rider that strips the president of his emergency power to reallocate monies to the wall, like he said he did last year.
Yeah, right.
And I said we're going to put explicit language, and there'll be a shut. Well, we shut the government down over that. I don't know. My expectation is Pelosi will probably cave and say no, and give in to that because we can't look bad as the people who are shutting down the government.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Because Trump pretty much owned that one on purpose. He said, you can blame me. And people did blame him back in February.
Yes, when he
which is like 8 years ago now. February is, it's only 4 months ago, but it seems like 8 years ago.
It does. Yeah, I guess that's possible.
So I'll stop boring people, but, I'd love to hear answers because I never hear answers that are real to what we're saying. They're like, the Senate will never act. We don't care about that. We've
Senate's not
actually
acting on
showed
anything
you
they're doing.
how to do it. An impeachment inquiry is not a voting on articles of impeachment. And they really don't have anything. They humming. Nancy's got a secret plan. She's setting it all up. Well, how is she setting it up? If she's setting it up for impeachment, what is she doing? What's the trajectory? What comes next?
Don't tell. I don't know.
Because if she wins in court, she's not going to say, well, see, I just proved we need impeachment. If we lose in court, she's going to say, yeah, you see, now we do need impeachment. What is she going to say? I don't understand what anybody's theory on this is. I don't understand how anybody thinks it makes any sense. This reminds me of the crazy time when everybody, we got to be for the Iraq War because, look, we got to be for the Iraq War.
They'll attack us if we're not.
And they attacked you anyway.
Right.
And it turned out, thank God, we at least were sort of against the Iraq War because then we could run against the Iraq War in 2006.
Yes, only to find that eventually Donald Trump would come around and defeat us for the presidency, claiming that he was against the Iraq War. When he wasn't.
We were for
so, okay. Well, yeah, and it's right. Donald the Dove, Hillary the Hawk. It worked. Ta-da! He still jokes about it.
He still does, and of course, it's a lie. But everything he says is a lie.
Yes.
And the slightly heartening news with this Iran thing is, if Trump wasn't president, if it was just Joe Biden or Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio, we would be at war with Iran right now. But
we might.
Nobody trusts, and I'm not giving Trump the credit. I guess I am in a backhanded way. Nobody trusts him.
He's not incompetent to get the war started.
Nobody trusts him. But the president says, it's got to be true. That's Trump. He's lying. Nobody believes it. And
Could be.
that, the reality
Wouldn't
is
that
that
be
there was a
something?
real reason, and there very rarely is a real reason why military action is the way to go. It's very rare, almost never. So in that sense, but suppose there really was one. Mexico did invade us. Who would believe Trump if he told us Mexico was invading us?
It's a good. Yeah, I don't know.
Nobody.
I mean, boy who
There would
cried
be an
wolf
absolute
problem.
split in the country. He's lying. This is nonsense. It's
Yeah.
not true.
The first video of the invasion would be, these are the deep fakes that we're talking about. I knew it. Or that's video of, something entirely different. That happened in Venezuela. That's not America. We wouldn't know what the hell to do.
Right. Absolutely. And in that sense, by sheer lack of credibility, Trump has altered the balance of the war narratives that usually the media adopts and loves, and even the ones that want it can't really sell it because, hey, it's Trump. And believe it or not, that's not great in the president, in my view. There's got to be some level where you have to say, well, the president thinks this is serious. Let's consider his arguments and debate it seriously. But we don't, because it's Trump. Because there's nothing serious about the man, and it's that's one aspect of that keeps us in some ways safe. Except he could start a war by himself whenever he wants. That's the scary part. If he's losing badly and someone says we need to wag the dog, he'll wag the dog. He'll send troops to wherever, though. I guess Putin's keeping him in check with Venezuela and Iran, and he's made friends with North Korea, so who's left to make war with? Mexico, I guess.
I mean, he has already said they're invading us, but no, seriously, really? I mean, I guess that would work with some people. The real kind of invasion.
Well, he's
not the
definitely
fake one.
called it an invasion,
yes,
but he,
right.
and in fact, they cite the Insurrection Act, which doesn't even apply to an invasion anyway, so it's kind of weird. But it does give the president has the power to repel an invasion, I suppose.
Yes,
by
that
a
was
foreign
Ken Cuccinelli.
government.
Yeah.
Not by people asking for asylum, but okay. And I don't know what ended up happening. I think that was some crazy Stephen Miller concoction that someone said this is too crazy, but I don't know.
Well, we saw
it's
Ken
not like
Cuccinelli carry that torch, and nobody was listening to him. I mean, maybe Stephen Miller told him to say that, or was the origin of the claim, or maybe Ken Cuccinelli was hoping Stephen Miller would pick it up from him and carry it forward, but so far, no.
Yeah, Ken Cuccinelli. Wow. Did he get that job?
Not that I know of. I think he's blackballed by McConnell. Actually,
good.
I think that was the last we read about that.
Thank God they hate each other as well. That's our saving grace, I suppose.
Guess so.
I don't know, but again, I do think the one thing that we'll remember from this era is how Trump was treated. And what I mean treated, I mean we've had a criminal in the White House who brags about being a criminal. I mean, Trump, Nixon did it all behind closed doors.
Yeah. Oh, he's not a crook. Whereas
I am
Trump
a crook.
said, I'm a crook. And yeah, right. Top record-breaking crook. No one like me.
And, institutionally, nothing was done. I don't know how you'll ever justify an impeachment inquiry after this. I think you might as well take it out of the Constitution at this point.
Yes, except it would be too difficult to do. So we'll just leave it.
Or rather, Democrats will never do it. Republicans, of course, can always keep impeaching because they can always do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. This one puts too much salt on his food. Impeach him.
Well, look, again, I don't mean to minimize it as a private betrayal and a political indiscipline, but Bill Clinton didn't actually do anything that was impeachable. He didn't even commit perjury. I mean, he didn't lie. again, I will defend this argument. From that civil deposition, they had approved some cockamamie definition of what sex was, and he could have honestly stated, I don't know if maybe he did some of the stuff, but who's to say?
I don't know.
He said, I got this and I got that, but I didn't do those 7 things that they listed there. But anyway, that's an old story. No point going through that. But
let's make this
what's left? What's left? What is the agenda for the Democratic House members for the rest of this year? Not even 2020, for the rest of this year. What are they going to do?
I do not know. I probably would know if I had paid closer attention, but there's your problem right there. I don't know. They may not have anything.
I assume they'll pass more bills, and there will be a meaningful budget fight by September. And I don't know if Joan's back making appearances, but I'm sure she's getting ready for 2 or 3 months from now, and we have another shutdown crisis and a debt ceiling crisis again.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Though I don't know what qualifies as crises anymore. And that's a meaningful moment where you're glad the Democrats have a House. And, of course, blocking things that Republicans would want to do. So there's a negative positive there. But there's no positive agenda that's going to happen. And everything's, frankly, just so sat up, wait and see till 2020, I suppose. And then, to me, I'm resigned to that. But then what? What do we do for 2020? And what do we do for posterity and history? Those are the things that are on the table now. And I don't think the House Dems are doing a good job on either.
No. Well, unfortunately, I don't think so either. And, while I will say this, they've done they've managed to shave a few months off of the process that it usually takes to get to where we are now, which is at the moment not really anywhere, but we're mired in court. But the process for getting there has been shortened.
We're not mired in court. We're not even in court.
Oh, well, that's true. We haven't had our filings.
The Annie Donaldson thing, which you didn't talk about, I should have mentioned it, is they've come to a deal with Annie Donaldson, who happens to be expecting.
Yes.
That's a pretty good excuse.
Yeah,
and you definitely, optically, you don't want to be in a fight with a woman who's pregnant, insisting she come testify. So, unfortunately, we won't see her for months and months.
Yes.
And months.
I don't know when she's due, but
I don't know when she's due exactly either. But I know that
I don't want to ask either.
They're going to take up the fights with Annie Donaldson again after November.
Yes.
And I can't actually quarrel with that one because she's pregnant. I understand.
Right.
Just forget about everything else. I think she could come up and testify even though she's pregnant, but I'm not the person who's going to go out there and make that argument.
Yeah, right. True.
I see that that's political suicide, so no. But you still have Don McGahn. There is not a court case against Don McGahn.
Right. True. I mean, I guess that there were people pointing to the various courtroom decisions that may bear on things, I guess, is what we're
all right. Let's talk about the 2 court decisions. I've talked about it before, but I want to repeat it again.
All right.
Those are 2 cases. The Mazars case. Mazars is an accounting firm that has represented Donald Trump for many years, done his financials and things like that. I'm not sure if they do his tax returns. I think
I don't think so.
Still is using that guy with the office. I don't know. Anyway, but that case is simply different. There is no executive privilege. There's no absolute immunity. There's no Rule 6E issues. None of the issues that stymie things from the Mueller report are involved in that. Yes. By the way, it wasn't the House Judiciary Committee that brought that case. It was the House Oversight Committee.
True also.
That's Elijah Cummings. They won the district court. There's an expedited, and there should be, I believe, this week, the appeals court hearing.
Yes.
And boom, the legitimate legislative purpose thing will probably get shot down, but then they'll go to the Supreme Court. It's normal oversight. I don't know what the reason to accelerate is.
Right. I don't know. I'm not certain. I mean, for the great victory in the district court, I'm enjoying looking at all the pages I've gotten from Mazars. Aren't you? We're all reading them, right?
The joke, of course, is we've got nothing, and we won't get anything until the case is concluded, whether at the appellate court or at the
I guess
Supreme Court.
The only argument they had to add in this is it has taken us several months less to initially start seeing some court decisions going our way, but they don't result in any concrete turnover of evidence. But okay,
and the big one is they relate not at all to the Mueller report issues, executive privilege, Rule 6E, absolute immunity. They have nothing to do with it.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess we got most of the discussion in with Armando before we cut out for the break, but I don't know. We'll have to see whether I have to monkey around with the editing and the podcast, but I think all the points have been made at this time, I think, and we're ready to move on to some other aspects of what is going on here. Let's see, Michael Musson has this comment to add. I want to impeach Trump over the border concentration camps and flagrantly violating Flores. And yes, absolutely, 99% of the best impeachment material, I think, actually exists outside the Mueller report. It just so happens that Mueller has done a pretty good job in teeing up maybe some of the, actually, I think, what might end up, if we ever did real investigations and impeachment inquiries, being some of the weaker claims about that would lead to impeachment, or they'll have the weakest claim on the legitimacy of impeachment. But I'm glad he teed them up for us. But I guess cloaking things in officialdom and surrounding them with people in suits and ties makes people believe that that's what we ought to be focusing on. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people who believe, I think, I don't know, you don't hear them a lot on Twitter, but I know they're out there, who Trump should have been impeached over his handling of the hurricane in Puerto Rico. There's plenty. I mean, to me, emoluments still sitting out there. That's another one I can't believe. I don't understand why. Still don't really get why. I saw Jerry Nadler complaining about emoluments the other day. Like, why you can't do a resolution disapproving of particular payments that you believe to be emoluments, and have that sitting out there so that the people who are doing work on emoluments and suing the president over emoluments can at least turn to the courts and say, well, are you sure this meets the definition of emoluments? I'm not sure. That's really up to you to decide, but I will point out as evidence in favor of the finding that these are prohibited emoluments. The Constitution prohibits the acceptance of the emoluments in the absence of explicit permission from the Congress, and the House of Representatives at least has spoken up to say that permission is not only not forthcoming, we reject any excuse you might make for keeping this money and believe you ought to be charged criminally at some point with the acceptance of these emoluments, except we can't charge you now because there's another OLC memo from way back when, and you know how those things go. But what's the downside of rejecting his version, his view of these payments in a resolution now? It doesn't have the force of law. All it could be is evidence in a court case somewhere. And why forego the opportunity to provide that evidence? I don't know. I'm not certain what the argument against it is. There's probably some arcane legal argument about it that I guess we could try and pry loose one day, but not today. All right, let's see. Speaking of emoluments, you want to talk a little bit more about those? We might as well. And there's a couple other things we should get to before we cut out on the day's show. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll save the jumping off onto emoluments for one of the readings for later in the week. I guess, man, there's a number of weird things that demand some attention. But yeah, trying to balance what is up there on the list versus not. I don't know. Here's let's see. Is this crazy enough for inclusion? Does it have to be included today? Well, let's talk a little bit. Maybe we'll do this jumping off point. Because we're not impeaching and we're not going to have a serious inquiry into these things because reasons, and maybe we're going to do infrastructure and healthcare, etc. I guess this demands some discussion. Oregon. You know what's going on out there by now, right? Long story short is that over a vote that they wanted to hold in the Oregon State Senate on a carbon tax, the Republicans don't want to vote on it. They don't like the idea of the carbon tax and whatever. The old Republican play has been pulled out here. And it's, oh my God, a carbon tax, taxes, it's tyranny and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like Nazis. Now, these are not concentration camps, but it's okay to say that carbon tax are just like Nazi oppression. Anyway, we need to flee the state in order to prevent the vote from being taken on this thing. And we've seen that play before from both Democrats and Republicans. But the new twist, of course, is that the patriot militias have said that they will shoot any cops that come to round up the absent Republican senators. And that seems like something of a departure from past practice. Now, let's see. Today's developments on this front, or yesterday's developments anyway. The governor of Oregon, quoted here in the Oregon papers, saying that no way I will negotiate with Senate Republicans while they're outside Oregon. I'm not certain what's so offensive about their being outside Oregon, except for the fact that they're, ducking their responsibility. But if you're going to negotiate with them, I'm not certain whether it makes any more or less sense where they are when you do it. But okay, might as well play the hand you've got here. So let's see. Reported by Sarah Zimmerman of the Associated Press here from out of Salem, Oregon Governor Kate Brown said Monday she won't negotiate with Republicans who walked out to thwart landmark climate legislation, at least not until they return to the Capitol. All 11 Republican senators didn't show up to work for a fifth day on Monday, denying Democrats the number of lawmakers needed to vote on a potential statewide cap-and-trade plan. It's just bad constitutional planning there, guys. Brown, a Democrat, deployed the Oregon State Police last week to seek and retrieve Republicans, but many fled the state and remain outside the police's jurisdiction. Senate Majority Leader Herman Bertschinger, maybe Bartschinger? B-A-E-R-T. Bertschinger? Shiger? No N in it. Bertschinger. Sorry, Herman. Senate Majority Leader Herman said in a statement he has yet to reach a deal with Democrats and that Republicans intend to remain out of state. Did I say majority or did I read it correctly? Minority leader. He's a Republican leader. So they're staying out. Democrats have an 18-11 majority but need 20 members to conduct business under state law. So what do they have? 18, 28, 29. So there's 29. Is there 29 senators or is there a 30th who's an independent? And they need, is that right? Then 2/3, 20 out of the 30 in order to conduct business. It's just bad planning. Like I said, bad constitutional planning. Why not a majority? Anyway, Brown blasted Bertschinger, let's say, in an interview with the Associated Press, saying she refuses to negotiate with the Senate Minority Leader until he returns to the building. If he wants to negotiate with the governor of the state of Oregon, he needs to be in the building, she said, or at least be in the state of Oregon. A spokeswoman for Bertschiger said he was unavailable to comment beyond the statement. He's unavailable. He's not in the state. Republicans are protesting what could be the nation's second statewide cap-and-trade program. The second one? Wow, look out. The measure would dramatically reduce greenhouse gases in Oregon by 2050 by capping carbon emissions and requiring businesses to buy or trade for an ever-dwindling pool of pollution allowances. Does it really matter what the substance of it is? We might as well figure it out, right? Republicans and other opponents, including the state's struggling timber industry, say the proposal will kill jobs. What? No way. I can't believe they said that about kill jobs, raise the cost of fuel, and gut small businesses in rural areas. Hello, we know. It's been the excuse for everything, always. They also say they've been left out of policy negotiations and that the measure represents an urban majority enforcing their priorities against the will of rural Oregon residents. An old song and dance. Some legitimacy to it, but, what can I tell you? That's the way majorities work. To say that Republicans haven't had a seat at the table is hogwash, baloney, and a lot of other things I can't mention in polite company, said Brown. She said that her office spent hours negotiating with Republicans last week and that there were many things put on the table for a potential compromise. Republicans walked from those options, though, she said. The governor also rejected conservatives' push to send the measure to the ballot, saying the voters already approved strong climate policy when they elected a Democratic governor and a Democratic supermajority, but not super enough, in the State House. This is the second time Senate Republicans who are in the minority have walked off the job to block a vote. Conservatives walked out for 4 days in May to block a $2 billion school funding increase, because everyone hates educating kids, returning only when the governor struck a deal to table legislation on gun control and vaccine requirements. Great. Part of that agreement, said Brown, was the Republicans wouldn't walk out again. So how's that going? I took priorities off the table that were key priorities for me and for Democrats generally. Senator Bertschiger said 3 times they would not walk out again. He broke that deal. Here's what I have for you on that. You can't make a deal with these guys. I know you needed to look reasonable and like the adult in the room. But now what has happened? Nothing, right? Now but things have gotten worse. This is the reasonable side of the story. This time, Republicans' walkout attracted national attention after a tumultuous weekend that began with the Senate leader ordering the Capitol closed because of a possible militia threat from far-right groups who threatened to join a peaceful protest organized by local Republicans. One of those groups, the Oregon 3%ers, joined an armed takeover of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. Remember that one? In 2016, and has offered safe passage to senators on the run. How? You can't. The threat, however, never materialized and fewer than 100 people showed up, so that's good. The governor said state house closure and threats from Senator Brian Boquist that state troopers should, quote, come heavily armed when they bring him back to the Capitol reflects a tense partisan divide felt on the national level. By the way, can I just take a pause here for a second to say, I expect that Boquist, if he hasn't already, will basically be saying, well, I was just joking. I was just sort of rhetorically, saying, well, I believe in Second Amendment rights, and I just wanted to reiterate that. You better be heavily armed when you come to get me, even though I have no intention really of shooting cops. But, and all you libs are so triggered by that. And you're, making up that I'm threatening to kill police officers. Really, I'm just running my mouth, et cetera, et cetera. That's an old song and dance. We've heard that one before. Rush Limbaugh is only an entertainer. I was just joking. Whatever. All sorts of things like that. That's pretty commonplace. What I wanted to point out, though, is that that'll end up being accepted essentially in the press. It has been. Otherwise we would have the National Guard out, right? They would be out there hunting these guys down if they thought that it was serious, and the whole country's eyes would be on the situation instead of just, giving it the side eye as we're doing now. But I just thought it was interesting as I was thinking about the tut-tutting and hand-wringing and the amount of ink spilled on don't say concentration camps, where this guy threatened to kill police officers, and he didn't really mean it. But we need to, parse this laser with a laser, the thin slices, to find out whether or not, concentration camp. Should we say this? Should we not say this? I just can't believe that the leeway that, again, Republicans have in doing all of this stuff. They love, and I'm sure they love getting away with it. All right, let's see, where were we? The governor said state house closure and threats from Boquist that they should come heavily armed when they come to bring them back to the Capitol reflects a tense partisan divide felt on the national level. We thought in Oregon that we were above all that, above this type of divisive and partisan politics, she said. I don't know why she thinks so. It's really clear that what is happening in Washington, D.C. is seeping out to the states, and I think that's the most unfortunate thing of all. Democrats have until the end of the week to get Republicans back to the building before the legislative session is set to end. I'm sure there's no way around rules. Legislators have yet to approve a majority of the state budget and other Democratic priorities addressing affordable housing, paid family leave, driver's licenses for immigrants in the country illegally, which is not a nice way of ending things. But just want to sort of point out now, I guess, switching over, let's say, to the more extreme part of the story. Charles Pierce, writing for Esquire about the gun nuttery part of this equation. The insanity in Oregon is a glimpse of our very dark future. So I guess I'll flip back and connect back to what Armando was talking about by saying, let's say that you really, really wanted as a Democrat a legislative agenda that would include top priorities like affordable housing, paid family leave, and driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. Or let's say there were even other interesting items that you took off the table in order to get people to negotiate with you. A $2 billion school funding increase, or gun control legislation, or vaccine requirements, all hot topics. But you're going to drop all of those things in order to get people to negotiate with you, and then they refuse to negotiate with you. But then you say, well, I hope you come back so that we can get some votes on affordable housing, paid family leave, et cetera, et cetera. And their answer to you is, or let's say on the national level, we want to vote about infrastructure and healthcare. We need to take care of all those things because reasons. And, they are important. And I can't pretend they're not life and death issues for lots of people. Pre-existing conditions, we keep going back to that, right? I mean, how many millions of people would be dead if we hadn't offered, the Affordable Care Act up? But again, I guess I'm just thinking every time we say, well, there are really important laws that affect kitchen table issues for millions. Yes, and F all of them because guns. I mean, I just wanted to sort of point out that we're not really playing the same game here. Not only can we not get a deal about not walking out of the Oregon legislature, but now we got it. Oh, well, I'm going to kill you if you try to use your supermajority, right? The voters elected a supermajority, a Democratic governor and a Democratic supermajority in the legislature. Yeah, well, fat lot of good it's doing you because we just say F all laws. LOL, YOLO, NM. We're heavily armed. I mean, we're only kidding. We're not heavily armed, right? I don't know. I mean, I guess we should just keep on keeping on and just hope we don't get shot and all of this stuff. The insanity in Oregon is a glimpse of our very dark future, says Charles Pierce, our subheader here. People with guns have involved themselves in a legislative dispute. They don't even have a legitimate legislative interest in this. While officials in one political party cheer them on. But by one political party, we of course mean both sides, right? In these times, everything looks like an ill omen, Charles writes. The Capitol is crowded with crows, but it is not an exaggeration to say that if you're not following the ongoing insanity in Oregon, you are missing a look into a very dark future. It begins with a not at all unusual squabble between the Republicans in the Oregon legislature and the Democratic governor, Kate Brown. At issue is a huge bill aimed at dealing with the climate crisis. On Thursday, every Republican member of the Oregon State Senate took a powder. denying Brown and the Democrats a quorum and effectively killing the bill. Now, this is not an unusual tactic. Not long ago, Democratic lawmakers in Texas and Wisconsin blew town for the same purpose, to throw sand in the gears of a legislative act of which they did not approve and could not stop by conventional means. In Wisconsin, it was to slow down an anti-union measure. In Texas, it was about a redistricting map that gerrymandered the Texas legislature into a farce. The legislative lambsters all had a good time, taking goofy videos in what appeared to be Holiday Inn lobbies, while Republicans back home fumed. The Texans, it should be noted, won a temporary victory. What makes Oregon different is what the fugitive Republican senators did. The Republican senators, with the full support of the Oregon Republican Party, made common cause with armed domestic terror groups. Calling them a militia is a misnomer, regardless of what they may think of themselves. When a Republican state senator named Brian Boquist heard that Brown was sending the Oregon State Police after them, he told a local television station, "Send bachelors and come heavily armed. I'm not going to be a political prisoner in the state of Oregon. It's just that simple. They'll never take me alive," basically is what he's saying here. Although, I don't know, I'm not certain why he loves to have bachelors, because I know what the excuse is supposed to be, but I just think he likes bachelors. And heavily armed ones at that. I'm just saying, not that there's anything, you know the old line. Almost immediately, it'll get him furious. So that's worth it. Almost immediately, the local domestic terror group sprang to Boquist's defense because they heard the siren call, right? Think Progress reported it this way. A member of the Oregon 3%ers, a militia group whose members have vowed to combat what they perceive as constitutional infringement, like emoluments, said they would act as the senator's de facto bodyguards against the state police. Apparently, they're defenders of the state constitution now. Isn't that interesting? The federal constitution is pretty clear about what you should be doing here. "We have vowed to provide security, transportation, and refuge for those senators in need," they wrote in a Facebook post. "We will stand together with unwavering resolve, doing whatever it takes to keep these senators safe." By the way, scratch out Republican, put in Democrats, scratch out senators, and put undocumented migrants. How does that go? "We have vowed to provide security, transportation, and refuge for those undocumented migrants in need." And guns against your border patrol. What do you say? "Oh my God, you're traitors." Yeah, that's exactly what you would say. In Idaho, where some of the lawmakers have supposedly fled, get them, Joan, the state's 3%ers group was similarly willing to defend the Republicans as well, posting threatening memes in its Facebook page. "This is what the start of civil war looks like." They love that one. The group wrote in one post, "Elected officials seeking asylum in a friendly jurisdiction." Speaking to Think Progress, Eric Parker, president of the group Real 3%ers Idaho, not those fake ones, said the group was currently networking to figure out if Brown had been asked for any out-of-state resources, such as help from the FBI or the Idaho State Patrol, and were willing to assist the Republican senators in any way necessary. And you could find a way to wave this off as well, except for what happened on Saturday. This from the Oregonian. A spokeswoman for the Senate president confirmed late Friday that the Oregon State Police has recommended that the Capitol be closed tomorrow due to a possible militia threat. Well, we know now that one didn't pan out, but okay. An Occupy the Senate rally on Sunday, sponsored by the local and state Republican Party, seems to have fizzled. Jason Wilson on the electric Twitter machine is your go-to on this, says Charles. He has pictures, including one of a chainsaw the size of a Saturn V. That doesn't calm me down at all. There's been a wildness in the land for a while now, and at this moment, at the top of government, we have a president, asterisk, who's more than willing to give that wildness a purpose and focus. People with guns have involved themselves in a legislative dispute while the officials of one of the political parties were rooting them on, and one session of a state legislature was canceled because of it. Roll that around in your head for a while and see where you end up. Something is building in our politics, and now I wish I hadn't watched that series about Chernobyl. We may be exceeding the tolerances of all our systems. Well, it is entirely possible. Do you think, given what has rallied these militias in the past, cap and trade bills, or for that matter, the Affordable Care Act, That's the tyranny that they were battling last time around. But I'm pretty sure they'll stand up for more legislating about health care, which we really, really want because kitchen table, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, there aren't a whole lot of options left, is all I'm saying. All right. But don't say concentration camp. We at least have that going for us. Let's see. What is Culture of Truth commenting here for us of our Bible speak friend? What's the difference between a militia and a gang and a terrorist group? Well, yeah, I think we all know the answer to that one, and it has mostly to do with the color chart. It's where you fall on the color wheel that determines which one you are. I mean, what's the difference between a patriot militia leader and a warlord? Right? Nothing. We use that term for Somalians, but an armed militia that says we'll take these people in and shoot the police. Yeah. Okay, yeah, good point here. Defending politicians and threatening to shoot the police is what the coal miners wanted. We all remember that formulation. All right, we'll take that and run with it. Let's see. Oh, Chris Cillizza has taken note of the Oregon Republicans and what they're doing as well. But somehow it's all just going to be fine. Anyway, we've reduced the problems to the Democrats' inability to produce sticky content right now. And so I think you used to be able to make a good money suggesting that, oh, yes, you should absolutely open an impeachment inquiry and have hearings because of the televised aspect of this. In other words, I want you to remember, we're talking content. It's time to pivot to video. Is it still operative? Can we bring that one out? So we want to provide video content for a short attention span theater in the United States. I guess that's really kind of what it comes down to. All right. Well, wrapping things up for the day, and unsure about status of tomorrow's show. We got to talk about scheduling for when we're departing for our big end of the week trip. Definitely not going to be on the air live Thursday, Friday. Going to try and record some material, hopefully for all 3 days, but seems like a tall order. We'll see what we can get done for today, and maybe the way to save it is might be able to record for Thursday and Friday and just say let's leave a little later. Besides which, if things go well tomorrow and we are doing a live show, if we can get to that, might be able to pull Joan McCarter back into things. I believe she's back from her trip, though whether she's fully recovered enough to join us on the air, I am not sure. Anyway, gotta hand things over shortly to Justice Putnam for his West Coast cookbook and speakeasy. Oh, West Coast. See, maybe we should send Justice up there to Oregon to straighten things out. I'm pretty sure that he could talk everybody down from their tree. All right. Let's see. Anything else that we want to toss out? And here's a wacky one. Do we have time for this one? Probably not. You know what I ought to be doing instead is getting ready to discuss what's coming up next. But one of these days, maybe one of the great things we can do with this 2-day to possibly 3-day layoff here is maybe we should be investigating some of the many transcripts that have come out of White House interviews over the last couple of days. I thought one brief story that jumped out of all the things that you could extract from the various transcripts, this is probably the least important, maybe, because who knows whether the president is just goofing around or is completely out of his mind. In a Oval Office interview with Time magazine journalists, at some point he gets into the discussion of the beautiful, beautiful letter that he got from Kim Jong-un, and he brings it out. He says, I should show you that. Have you seen it? Have you seen this beautiful letter? And he brings it out to show to the journalists, and one of the journalists is a photojournalist. He takes a picture of this letter. And the headline story here is that Trump eventually tells this Time magazine journalist that he's threatening him with prison. As he says to him, because he doesn't understand the law or how it works or what part he's talking about, he says, excuse me, under Section 2, which means what? Article 2 of the Constitution. Under Section 2, well, you can go to prison instead, because if you use the photograph you took of that letter that I gave you, confidentially. I didn't give it to you to take photographs of it, so don't play that game with it. He threatens to put the guy in jail. He brought the letter out. Let me show you this letter. And by the way, what doesn't get captured, I don't think, in the headline here is he takes the picture and then goes on with the interview. The interview goes on for 20 minutes before Trump gets angry at the guy again and then brings up taking the picture thing, and then comes up with this, a section 2. You're going to be thrown in jail. We'll talk about it, I think, if we can do some more shows for the rest of the week. In the meantime, do stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next, right here on Roots Radio. Let's see. Look at this. Former top DOJ official Neil Katyal put the administration on blast and fact-checked Trump's claims on family separations. That won't go well for him. On the rest of the menu for the day, Puerto Rico still isn't getting the emergency aid Trump bragged about 2 weeks ago. Oh, 2 weeks. Well, now that time is over. Trump officials keep getting caught hiding scientific reports they don't like and claiming the post-World War II pact. Oh, I'm going to wait for this one on the other side.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
This one's amazing. Trump just hates treaties, I guess. Claiming the post-World War II pact treated the United States unfairly, Trump privately talks about ending the 68-year-old Japan Defense Treaty. It's weird that he hates treaties. He loves treats, but he hates treaties. Too bad.